Pass. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the open session minutes from January 27th, 2020. Need a motion for that?
Make a motion to approve the open session minutes of January 27th, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the executive session minutes of January 27th, 2020. Motion for that?
Motion to approve the executive session minutes of January 27, 2020.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's move on to student comments. Owen?
All right, as usual, I'd like to thank you guys for having me. It's a big privilege for me. All right, so as we all know, as of right now, we are 4 days away from winter break. And during that break, I am looking forward to catching up on some reading. Although winter break is just a few days away, many of us are looking forward to having some time off. And though many of us are looking forward to having some time off, we are still having an exciting week here in Mach. And first off, we have the Inspired Learning Day brainstorming session. This Wednesday of this week, we will be having a school-wide brainstorming session during our advisory to help have a voice in our next Inspired Learning Day that will be coming up on April 15th. I am looking forward to coming up with some ideas, and something I would like to do for our next Inspired Learning Day is to give students some more voice on the sort of things that are offered in terms of activities, which I feel would be a really great way for more students to be able to pursue something that they're interested in. I feel like that would be really worthwhile. All right, so next up we have singing telegrams. Also on Wednesday, many faculty and students will get the opportunity to listen to our very talented chorus students as they walk around the school to deliver singing telegrams. And our athletic update is our congratulations goes out to both the boys and the girls indoor track teams for winning the DVC championships. This is the first time in This is the first time that the girls have won the championship in school history, and it's the first time the boys have won since 2012. Dan DeZutter raced in the 1,000 meter with Callie Comer, Michelle Cody, Liz Lange, and Gianna Jordanopoulos, racing in the 4x200. And those individuals all broke school records. Furthermore, the boys basketball team qualified for the Clark tournament. It will play Monday at 2:45 p.m. at Clark University against Grafton. 6 athletes were officially nominated. 6 athletes officially committed to playing college athletics. Nate Gould committed to New Hampshire football. Alex Ott committed to UMass Lowell's men's soccer. Christian Moss committed to UMass Lowell's men's lacrosse. Natalie Pina committed to Central Connecticut State women's swimming. Ashley Porter committed to Fitchburg State women's soccer. And Jared Joyce committed to Bowdoin College men's track and field. Furthermore, Mendon Upton Regional School District's visual arts are featured at the Youth Art Month in 2020 starting today. The Massachusetts Art Education Association sponsored Youth Art Month exhibit will be on display from February 10th through March 26th at the Massachusetts State Transportation Building at 10 Park Plaza in Boston. Viewing hours are from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, with the exception of President's Day. There will be hundreds of pieces of artworks from across Massachusetts on display in observance of the nationwide celebration of Youth Art Month, with 12 of those pieces being Nipmuc students' work. Mrs. Klish and Mr. Campbell, Nipmuc's visual arts educators, are pleased and proud to announce the artists with their artworks will be on display in the exhibit. David McCrae, Penelope Broder, Jenna Milady, Avery Quinn, Nicole Ernst, Claire Mental, Ashley Porter, Olivia Skiba, Emily Kirby, Alex Cummings, Jason Lazars, and Andrew Murphy And just a reminder to enjoy your week, and vacation's right around the corner. Thank you very much.
And how many days?
In 4 days. So it is right there.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
If that's it.
Yep, that concludes the student.
Okay, very good. All right, community comments. Anybody from the community wants to make a comment? Go ahead, Shelley.
Hello. Do I need to say where I'm from?
I think so, yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Shelley Cook from Upton, as well as the amended Upton Regional Teachers Association. I was wondering if the committee would be open to modifying possible spring conference dates if it would conflict with MCAS dates as it does this year. Because currently the ELA at the high school, ELA MCAS at the high school, is going to be on one of the half days.
Oh, really?
We can speak to that, Dr. Rizchik, if you wanted to.
Sure. So we worked with Maureen Cohen to reach out to the Department of Education, so they have approved for this year a split in those days. So session 1 of MCAS testing will take place on Tuesday, with session 2 occurring on Friday. So that has already been approved to accommodate for those activities.
Oh, good, excellent. Does that satisfy your request?
Yes, it does. Thank you very
Excellent,
much.
very good. Any other community comments? All right, seeing none, let's move on to superintendent's comments.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. I believe during the last 2 school committee meetings, we discussed 2 different initiatives. One, our work with Project Lead the Way and expanding hands-on learning in STEM-related fields, both at the middle school and at the elementary level. And then the meeting before that, I know Dr. Cohen, along with our social studies department chairs, discussed the work with regard to the civics project requirement in the curriculum starting in the 8th grade. The great news is within the last week, we've received word that we've gotten over $78,000 in competitive grants for these 2 projects. First, $38,250 from the competitive grant program known as Civics Teaching and Learning Grant through the Department of Education. It's a joint partnership with 3 other districts, Ashland, Hopkinton, and Uxbridge, and it really supports our 8th grade teachers' professional development, specifically participating through 2 think tanks, the Democracy Lab and also the Modern Civics Project through EdTech Teacher. And it really is around training our educators on how do you leverage innovative pedagogy, specifically project-based learning, to really drive home the key points around civics education. So really, really exciting work, and again, our students through this work will really get into delving into simulations around the democratic process, things around media literacy, and really authentic projects. So really, really exciting. I think as Maureen talked about during the last meeting, along with Dave Quinn, we are one of 3 out of 82 schools across the Commonwealth to receive competitive grant funding through Project Lead the Way, which again is a national organization. And that $40,000 is going to help us with the materials and the supplies to start 2 different programs, Project Lead the Way Launch, which are project-based learning modules in K through 5, so both at Memorial and Clough, and then also Project Lead the Way Gateway to kind of expand what we're doing already in grades 5 and 6 at the elementary school, but again, more work around automation, robotics, energy and the environment, the science and technology, and design and modeling process. So real exciting. I want to publicly acknowledge Maureen and Dave for their incredible work in putting this together. Again, I can't stress enough, these are competitive grants. and from a really, really concentrated effort in a short period of time. I mean, they really, what are we talking, guys? 72 hours maybe of real intensive work. They put together 2 winning proposals. So congratulations.
Yay.
Very, very proud of you. Second piece, I think Owen stole my thunder, and Lord knows I could never deliver with such spunk that he does. But again, Youth Art Month is something that speaks to the strength of not just here Nipmuc and the Fine Arts program, but it's really K through 12. So I'm glad that he mentioned our Nipmuc students, but overall there's 38 students from kindergarten to senior year whose artwork is going to be displayed at the festival, again, between February 10th and March 26th at the Massachusetts State Transportation Building. I put in your background notes a link to a very nice little website that Alice Gentili put together, which talks about the exhibit, but actually displays all of our students with their works of art which are going to be displayed. So at your leisure, get a chance, take a look at it. It really is, again, K through 12, a really, really solid program, and speaks to the quality of instruction and the quality of work that our students produce every day.
The meeting's not streaming right now, just so you know.
Oh, it isn't? Okay. And then last but not least, something else that I'd like to point out is the Nipmuc Athletic Hall of Fame. I think this is something that has been 2 years in building, and I'd ask our athletic director, Chris Schmidt, to speak to it. Chris.
Sure. As Joe said, we started the process of creating a Hall of Fame approximately 2 years ago, almost to the month. It started with a small group of 4 or 5 of us and expanded to now we have our 9 board members and a number of people who volunteer to help us out. This past December, the board met and elected 8 inductees as our first class as far as individuals go, and 2 teams. Our inductees range from probably those of you that remember Jim Grant, graduating back all the way in the 60s, as recently as, I want to say Susie Yanovich, I think is our most recent grad, and she was from 2002. So I think we have a wonderful representation. We have coaches such as Coach Grant and Coach Lever. We have athletes such as Paula Johnson, Susie Yanovich, Jay Harvey, Matt Brochu, excuse me, just drew a blank there, and Val Dugas. The 2 teams we'll be inducting are the 1994 soccer team, which is our first state championship team, and then our 2002 baseball team. So it's been a terrific journey. Most recently, this past Saturday, we had a fundraiser in Milford, which I think was incredibly successful, and we look forward to our ceremony on March 15th here at the high school. I know Joe has it up there, but I encourage anyone to visit our website. Paula Johnson's actually our webmaster, which is wonderful. She's been doing a great job. It does outline our inductees as well as ways to purchase tickets for the event on the 15th. So if anyone in here is interested, we're going to be having some of our student athletes, some of our parents help out for the day. And no, I think it'll be a great celebration. I know we're all looking forward to it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Stuff going on. All right, let's move on to subcommittee updates. Budget subcommittee. We have the presentation of the first pass of the fiscal year 2021 MERS budget.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to stand up for this one, okay?
Okay.
Okay, as we are, usually during this point of the year, we have some of our initial projections. We start this process every year in November, right before Thanksgiving, where all of our principals and anybody who is a department head puts together the requests. It goes through the process through first our principals, and then at my level, and then to the budget subcommittee. So what I'm going to present tonight are some of our initial projections based upon our needs for level services, but then also some real critical needs that are needed throughout the district. And then, as we do always during the last Wednesday of January, we get the governor's budget, so we have the House 1 revenue projections, which I will present this evening as well. So I think first and foremost, any organization that has integrity, any organization that has success is mission driven. And plain and simple, when we redid our strategic plan in 2018, we came up with a very, very simple, concise mission. That being, we empower all learners to thrive. And by thrive academically, thrive social, emotionally. Okay? And by all learners, obviously first and foremost are students, but equally important are adult learners as well. Everybody in the organization. And I love this picture because it's really a metaphor for us as 308 professional and support staff in the Mendon Upton. We're deeply committed to this mission. So in thinking about putting together this budget, I'm thinking about how much life has changed, and particularly in 25 years. I think a lot of our parents, maybe some of our younger parents, went to school in the 90s, and believe it or not, these are actual pictures from Nipmuc and Misco in 1995. And sometimes I find that hard to believe that 1995 was already 25 years ago. Okay, and in looking at these pictures, what I see is fairly traditional instruction, right? And I'm sure it served kids extremely well, okay? And if you think about what were the predominant jobs, what were the careers, what was required for college and beyond back then, even though it was only 25 years ago, it was a much more simplistic, straightforward era. And I'm sure the instruction that our kids received across all levels served them really well. But I think about today, and I'm old enough now, this is my 30th year. I was a classroom teacher back in 1995, and I could have been a teacher at Nipmuc very easily. But I have the distinct honor and privilege of 3 or 4 times a week going into classrooms across all levels. And I think about the classroom of today, and these are the types of things that I see. Okay, a little bit different than the traditional desks in traditional rows. I see things like really skillful differentiation, where, for example, in Jen Hall's first grade classroom, her group of 22 students are doing different things in different corners of the room. If I'm at Misco, say in a 7th grade ELA classroom, I see a Socratic discussion going on, where instead of the teacher being the center of attention, you know, the proverbial sage on stage, students are actually talking to each other and debating things with passion. I see the same thing here at Nipmuc. I see collaborative group work, where again, students are skillfully using technology to enhance their ideas and to enhance their research. And I see also across all levels, for example, this just occurred on Friday in Brenda Webster's 5th grade classroom, where her students were Skyping with an author whose work they had just read. Things are happening in our classrooms that we wouldn't even have thought of back 25 years ago in 1995. So I think in thinking about our mission around all learners thriving and what we truly need to be a successful district in moving forward, we can never lose sight of the skills and competencies that our students need for college and careers and beyond, well beyond 2020. So with that said, the first place I always look at in crafting our budget is plain and simple, is our enrollment and what is happening from one year to the next. So as you can see, we stand at our official October 1st enrollment number, in which all of our funding is based upon. This year is 2,283 students. And based upon NESDEC enrollment projections, which I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes, we're actually anticipating a very slight decrease of about 20 students. And pretty much all of that decrease is going to be seen at Misco Hill Middle School for the simple reason the number of 8th grade students that'll be matriculating outward and the number of 4th grade students that we, at present time, that'll be matriculating to the 5th grade. Once again, in determining our local assessments, we take a look at proportion, number of students from Mendon, the number of students at Upton. That is virtually unchanged. I want to say, at least over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been roughly a 45-55% split between our two communities.
But if you go back 25 years ago, it was the other way around.
Yeah, that's correct. Something that we take a great deal of pride in is we have maintained reasonable class sizes that, again, allow our teachers to meet individual learners' needs. So as you can see at the elementary level, K through 4, it's in the ballpark of 20. It's generally across the board in the low 20s. At Misco Hill, it's a little under 24. And Nipmuc is a little under 23. Keep in mind, over that 5-year span, we've had a slight increase, and the biggest reason for that slight increase is a greater number of students matriculating to Nipmuc from the 8th grade and fewer students accessing BVT. So I want to talk a little bit about the enrollment projections, always right around the first of the year, from an organization known as NESDEC, which is the New England Staff Development Council. We receive a 10-year enrollment projection. This is my 9th year in the district, and for the first time, it actually shows both 5 and 10-year projections are enrollment going up. It generally has been either very flat or a slight decline. This year, the trend has actually reversed itself, and it shows the trend being, over the next 10 years, a gain of about 300 students district-wide, K through 12. So it gives it for the regional school district, but then it also breaks it down by community. Okay, so if you take a look at the Upton enrollment over that same 10-year span, it's in the ballpark of about 270 to 280 students. So the reality is the majority of this increase is going to be coming from Upton. Okay, as you can see with these Mendon numbers, it's a gain of only estimated 34. So you might be asking yourself, what do they use to make that determination? And obviously you have the best numbers, years 1 through 5, because what they do is they look at the birth rates in each community. But then they also look at things like housing permits, and then they also look at mobility patterns in and out of each community. So kind of the interesting piece in, it's not 100% correlation, but what they do is they track the births in each community and then they correlate out 5 years. Those are your kiddos that are born in your two towns that'll be entering Clough or Memorial as kindergartners 5 years later. So as you can see, it's not a perfect correlation, but it generally mirrors. We're anticipating kind of level, maybe slight, but as you can see, this was predicted for this year, 18 going into 19, and it actually spiked. But you can see beyond 2020, going into 2021, a fairly precipitous increase. Something else that has come into factor, and you're going to have to help me with this, Kelly, is this unit right here. Was it 169 Main Street?
49.
149 Main Street. This is an apartment complex with, I believe you told me 44 units?
44 units.
44 units that is slated to open in June or start renting in June. I've got concerns about Memorial with regard to enrollment over the summer, but we'll have to see what happens with that. So in talking about what we've put together for this first pass budget, what we've put together is a proposal that is $38,952,699. That represents a 6.97% increase of a little more than $2.5 million over this current year's budget. What this does is it does maintain level services, but it addresses some real critical needs that I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Again, fitting with our strategic plan, it keeps those reasonable optimum class sizes, and it builds upon our strategic plan's priorities of social emotional learning supports and also inclusionary practices. So as I usually do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss what are some of the drivers that are really driving this bottom line figure, and then also what we're looking at as far as revenue at this point in the process. So obviously the two biggest are your salaries and your employee benefits. So at this point we have a total of $553,231, or 2.75%, in reserve for all of our steps and lanes, but also a cost of living adjustment. Please keep in mind that with all 5 of our associations, we're currently in negotiations at this time. As far as employee benefits, that is another sizable chunk. Right now, there is a little under $590,000, or a little under 12% increase in insurance. And this kind of speaks to a combination of our premium increase, but also changes. We're very, very fortunate that we have, in some places, particularly at the elementary level, some young, enthusiastic, vital teachers. However, changes in life happen. Some of them are getting married, some of them are having children, and it's not uncommon that we have employees opting to go from a single plan to a family plan, or changing HMO to PPO and so on. So there has to be a certain amount budgeted for that. I think like both of our towns, we have the 3rd straight year, unfortunately, with a fairly substantial increase in our Worcester County retirement assessment, a little under 10%, or 9.90%, for a total of $77,050. Transportation is very much fixed. We will be entering the first of a 3-year contract with our existing provider, Telstone & Son, and that's a 6.5% increase, or $111,440. And then again, our special ed transportation for specialized programming, or our out-of-district placements, also remains to be very frustrating because there's a really limited number of providers out there. In our area, it's roughly 4 providers. So again, right at this time, we have a fairly conservative estimate of 7.41% or 91,600 increase. As far as student services, and I'll show you, this impacts our state aid. We've gone from having 6 students in total in our 2 communities in charter schools to a total of 12. With that additional 6, we have an increased assessment from the state of 92,615, which is fairly sizable. And as a regional school district, we have to subsume that cost, and then a slight decrease in our out-of-district tuitions for our students with significant needs. We also have a increase of $75,000 or 7.15% for our maintenance lines. I would say the largest chunk of that is a concern that we have with regard to our burner, one of our burners here at the high school. Realize there are the 2 original burners from 1997, and I don't know if I could give the technical term, but at present time, one of them is jerry-rigged, would you say, Jay? And we're looking during the summer months to have some significant maintenance and actually in some ways a rebuild of it. As far as textbooks and instructional supplies, we are now on year 7 of the Reading Wonders program, which is our K-5 elementary literacy program. There is an update to it, and the $51,500 gets us that update with some new materials and some newer, more current materials that are more aligned to the standards. And then we're looking to do a 3-year renewal of all of our texts. If you remember, our texts here at the high school are digitally based, so students use their devices. We are due to renew our license on those, so that would be a 3-year expenditure. And then as far as technology, we always try to keep things current at all levels. We're getting an increased demand, particularly for different applications and more devices for our youngest learners at the elementary level. So a $60,000 investment for both technology and applications for students. So also included in this, so one is presumed here is keeping level services as far as keeping our existing staff, programs, and services, but 4 of these really critical needs. And to the school committee, there's probably nothing here that is new, because if you recall last year's budget proposal, I think almost verbatim, these positions were in, with the exception of 1. So a real critical need across our district. We do not have a single school psychologist. You will speak to any professional staff member, definitely any of our principals. As social emotional learning is really one of the hallmarks of our strategic plan and something that we are trying to work with, we're seeing increased stresses, increased anxiety, increased mental health needs across all 4 schools, across every single level. So our request is for 2 full-time equivalent school psychologists. The vision would be 1 would serve our 2 schools in Mendon, 1 would serve our 2 schools in Upton. And the cost of that is $80,000 budgeted for each. However, I think it's a smart decision for the simple reason that for the work that we have to do in doing assessments and sometimes some intensive work, we're already budgeting $95,000 as contracted services. So the mindset is, why not have that in-house as employees that can, yes, do the testing, but also deliver services to students. Then, again, because of the stressors across the board with regard to the management of special education services, it would be, in the request is the need for one full-time equivalent special ed team chair, and that way all 4 of our buildings would have somebody overseeing the team process. And then last but not least, this is one of the 4 positions that was cut last year. It is a high school certified library and media information services specialist. So at present time at Nipmuc Regional High School, we do not have a certified library media specialist. Right now, there is somebody manning, a paraprofessional is in there. However, as we've discussed in previous meetings, it's got implications with regard to the high school's accreditation. As I think I shared in November, we received correspondence from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, or NEASC, which this spring is going to conduct a commission-directed visit to ascertain the level of support, because realize as part of the standards for accreditation, it's expected that we have a certified library and media specialist at our high school. So I do want to say this. I think what we're putting together is limited as far as new positions, and particularly things that are critical needs with regard to programs and services across the district. I want to share with you what our principals, what our department heads put forward to my level and the level of the budget subcommittee as far as the needs across the district. And you see things like additional academic tutors that were cut. You see the Misco Hill Library Media Specialist position, which was cut. You see special educators. Things like here at Nipmuc, a technology teacher. We embed technology, but we don't have technology courses per se. Or again, something like an engineering teacher at Misco. Or at the elementary levels, math and literacy courses. I point these out to you for the simple reason that none of these are included in the proposal. And I also would like to point out to you, and I know a couple of you at least work in education, you know how other school districts operate. There's nothing here that is not kind of standard issue in many districts across the Commonwealth. Okay, there's nothing here that I would characterize as boutique or above and beyond. So I think that is something to keep in mind, and particularly as we talk about the objectives, the strategic objectives and strategic initiatives that are envisioned in Inspire, our strategic plan, and how we get there. So talking about the revenue, I wish I had better news to share with you. First and foremost, our increase in our major funding, Chapter 70, is the minimum of $30 per student. And that comes out to be a whopping increase of 0.52%, or $65,310. In Governor Baker's budget, the regional transportation is going up by 1.7%, or a little under $20,000. We did get an increase in charter reimbursement for the simple reason that we have 6 more students going away. But keep in mind, as I reported before, that's offset by the increase in charter tuition. So when we receive something known as a cherry sheet, okay, which kind of tells, okay, this is your state aid as it goes through the process, our total net increase is $23,603, or 0.17%. I'm going to jump to, well, no, you know what? I'll go in order, top to bottom. As far as the local assessments, that obviously, again, this is my 9th budget presentation over the last 9 years. we're seeing more and more stress put on our two communities. So again, I'll point out, again, something known as the MLC, or the minimum local contribution, which according to the state funding formula is the amount that the state is saying at a minimum you should be adding to your budget. So it has the MLC of Mendon to about 491,828, and the minimum local contribution to Upton increasing by 469,452. So both substantial increases, to be sure. And if you recall, last year, what we worked out was each community contributing the MLC to the budget, and if you recall, that was still a challenge. If you recall, even with the MLC increase, both of our communities, we still had to cut 4 positions. We had a deficit in the ballpark of about 250,000, if my memory serves me correctly. So in this initial proposal, we are in addition to that 491,828, the district is requesting an additional 807,486 to debt service, not including debt service to Mendon, and an additional $989,502 to Upton. So as you can see, very, very much substantial, and between the two communities, the local assessment increase is over $2.7 million. Now, something else that's part of that is a little bit problematic is we usually have some of our district resources to tap into, and one being E&D, which is excess and deficiency, or essentially for a regional school district, it's like free cash. This year we cannot access it for the simple reason that our E&D will be certified in the ballpark of around $400,000. And obviously we can't roll over that $300,000 because, like a municipality, we need the E&D as a rainy day fund. And specifically for us, it would be something like a move-in situation with an out-of-district tuition, or something relatively catastrophic happening that could impact our operational budget. Again, we have $250,000 that we can access from things like before and after school program, and also some of the Medicaid reimbursements. So our total district receipts is down $300,000 to only $250,000. Something that I do feel is important to mention, and I know here at the school committee level, we've discussed it before, but keep in mind there's been a lot of fanfare in the state, particularly through the fall, and then right before the holidays, Governor Baker signed something known as the Student Opportunity Act, which over the course of 7 years is going to infuse an additional $1.5 billion into public education across the Commonwealth. I think something that's really, really important to keep in mind is this is an act that is largely, overwhelmingly, going to gateway cities. Okay, in fact, it's great that he increased the Chapter 70 aid by $304 million. That's wonderful. It's year one of a 7-year phase-in. But keep in mind, 80% of those funds are only going to 35 districts. So the overwhelming majority of districts, about 50, well, I shouldn't say overwhelming, the majority of districts, like us, are getting that $30 minimum per student. Okay, however, go down the road 5 miles and you're in Milford, Milford's picking up an additional $4.9 million. Go a little bit farther up north to Worcester, Worcester's picking up an additional $18 million. Why? They have a large number of English language learner students. They also have a large number of economically disadvantaged students. The reality is, relatively speaking, we have very few English language learners, and as a district, we're not even at 10% for economically disadvantaged. So with those demographics staying as they are, again, the point that I've made over the last few years, the solution to our funding is not coming anytime soon from the state. So if you look in the handout, I have a bunch over here. This is just a summary. It's right on page 2 as far as what it looks like as far as the increase, as you can see, is $2.5 million, or $2,537,940, which translates to a 6.97% increase. And then the increase in local assessment, which is substantial, to Mendon would be $1,299,314, and the increase to Upton, $1,458,954. And you see how that comes out overall. Something that I've talked about, I know extensively over the last 5 years, is this whole notion of target share. And again, the state's funding formula has many aspects of it which are fairly complex. But one thing that is key in thinking about that whole MLC, or minimum local contribution, is the whole notion of target share. And again, this goes back to 2007 when they changed the funding formula and they made some substantial tweaks to it. But essentially, target share is about what percentage of the budget for all of the children that attend public education in a given town should be picked up from the community. What should be their target share? And they recalibrate it every single year, but they look at two things. They look at aggregate property values and aggregate personal income levels. And collectively, they put a percentage on it known as MGRF, or Municipal Growth Revenue Factor. So kind of interesting, you can kind of see, I always, every year, I look at target shares for all of our neighboring communities, and when they calibrate it, the overall goal in looking at the aggregate for all 351 communities is that municipalities should cover 59% of public education, and state aid should serve as 41%. Okay, and again, there's always a range. The lowest consistently as far as target share is the city of Lawrence. It's very low, 13.7%. And there are now 157 communities that are at the cap, which is 82.5%. So if you take a look at all of our neighboring communities, you can see we have two neighbors, Hopkinton and Westboro, that are at the cap, and actually they've been at the cap for quite some time. And you can see the relative wealth, compared to Milford or Northbridge and so on. So every year I take a look at our two communities, and for this coming fiscal year, Mendon's target share is about 78.5%, and Upton's is a hair under 76%. So as you can see, then what they do in their formula is they say, okay, what was your target share for the current fiscal year? And you can see what it is. And are you at it or are you below it? So it turns out that this fiscal year coming up, there are 101 communities that are below target share, and Mendon and Upton are both of them. Okay? So in determining the minimum local contribution, they basically say, okay, if you're 2 points below where you need to be, we're going to tack on an additional 1% towards your minimum local contribution. And both of our communities have been in this place for quite some time. And I think, to be fair, I think both of our communities have made tremendous progress in funding education. And part of this, and we can argue fair or unfair, they recalibrate the target share calculations each and every single year. Okay, but what the data shows is, relatively speaking, both of our communities are becoming wealthier. So here's something that I really would like to show to you. Like I said, this is my 9th year. This is the 10th budget that I've developed. And I'd like to show you what has happened to target share over the last 10 years. Okay, I created this little GIF. Sorry if it's a little fuzzy here. But the green represents the target share for Mender or Upton. The blue represents the state share. And this has only been in the span of 10 years. I can remember my very first budget, FY12, we were in the ballpark of 60%, okay, as far as target share. And you can see in that 10-year span, we're now in the high 70s. Okay, if I was a betting man, I'd say in the next 5 years, these two communities will be at the cap. They'll be at 82.5%. So again, it underscores the point that I'd like to make, that, again, I don't see anything changing anytime in the next 7 years with the Student Opportunity Act of our two communities getting the minimum. So here's the reality. I am fully aware that this is a sizable ask to both of our communities, and it clearly exceeds the 2.5 levy increase. Again, to underscore my point, if we were to have a repeat of last year, where each community's local assessment contribution would be that minimum local contribution increase, you'd be talking about Mendon giving us an additional $491,828, and Upton giving us an additional $469,452. Just with the MLC increase, the shortfall, as we've projected it now, would be close to $1.8 million. So what would a shortfall of $1.8 million mean? Well, first and foremost, what's been proposed as far as those 4 positions that are critical needs obviously wouldn't be funded. I think at a minimum, you're talking about 25 to 30 professional and support staff layoffs. As a result of those layoffs, you'd be talking about significant increases in class sizes across the board. I think you'd have to start the conversation about reduction of programs, both core academic and in elective areas such as music, the arts, and world languages. I think you'd also, because you're looking at cuts across the board, fewer supports for some of our neediest learners who are receiving interventions through a 504 plan or through special education. And then I think we'd probably look at going back to the future with regard to our athletics programs, both at the middle school and the high school, in increasing user fees. And then obviously things like what I talked about with regard to textbooks, technology, instructional materials would also be on the chopping block. And then, as I said before, real concern about adverse action, specifically warning or probationary status to our high school's accreditation through NEASC, or the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. So, kind of in closing, I think we're once again at a real significant inflection point here in the district where it really could be one of 2 possible paths. I think we don't have to look very far for a negative path. Okay, something, every October I deliver a report and I talk about our enrollment and I talk about school choice. Okay? And I think at present we have 169 students choicing into our district. Of those 169, 118 come from these 2 communities, Northbridge and Uxbridge. Why is that? Why is it that Northbridge and Uxbridge collectively have to have a $3.3 million line item in their budgets just to pay for students choicing out? Why does that happen? Quite frankly, because of insufficient support. Okay? I witnessed some of that, but we have staff members, we have parents, we have community members remember where this district was between 2009 and 2011, when literally in that span of 3 years, we lost 20% of our staff. Okay, and headlines like this were commonplace. Okay? I think in contrast, we can talk about 2015. We can talk about 2015 when the two communities came together and saw how important an investment was in our staff, in our programs, in our services, but most importantly in our students. And we had 2 successful overrides pass in our 2 communities. As a result, since 2015, and that was 5 years ago, this is the place that we're in now, where these headlines, rather than what I showed you before, are more commonplace, where we've got emphasis on things like social emotional learning, particularly at the elementary level. We commit, we plant our stake in the ground about inclusion and meeting the needs of particularly our neediest learners, where we're doing remarkable things with regard to technology. We're here at the high school, we're recognized as one of the absolute best high schools in the country. Whereas a district, because of the work that's happening across the level, once again, the second time in 7 years, we're a national AP district honor roll district. And you see all the accolades that are happening across the board. Just in this meeting alone, talking about Project Lead the Way, Chris talking about what's happened to our athletics program. All of those things are tied clearly to funding. And I think, again, to go back to where I started, it's really about fulfilling our promise. You as a school committee hold me accountable. I hold our leadership team accountable, who in turn holds our professional and support staff accountable to meeting our goals that are in our district strategic plan. I know some of you were involved in crafting that strategic plan. That was a team of 40 parents, community members, staff members, and students that talked about what is the vision of our district moving forward, and what is this portrait of learner? What are these 6 essential competencies that every single student needs to know and be able to do to be successful for careers that yet don't even exist? So that's really the promise that again speaks to the real key inflection point that we're at as a district. So as far as next steps, I think I'm glad to see a couple of our selectmen here tonight. I think we have to engage very honestly with the multi-board, with our selectmen, with our finance committees about what our pressing needs are. Something that I'm time and again asked, and I'd like to use our next school committee meeting to talk about this, is what are the 5-year projections? I know during my 9 years, the budgeting mindset has been, let's just get through this year. Let's do this. Let's figure this out. I think we maybe have to rethink this. And from time to time, I'm asked, well, okay, that's great for FY21, Joe. Well, what is 22 going to look like? 23? Jay and I have started the process of modeling, not just 21, but what would it look beyond that, looking at a pattern of the last 7 years. So the next school committee meeting, I'd like to share that information. But more importantly, going back to those 22 positions that we didn't include, what does that look like and what are our real priorities moving forward with those? And I think last but not least, communicating with all of our stakeholders. I've always had the mantra of no drama, and I don't like the budgeting process to be a lot of drama. I don't want to see us go back to the days where school committee meetings are held in the gym at MISCO and people are sitting in the bleachers screaming. I don't think that's necessarily the route that we want to go. But I think our parents, our community need to know what our critical needs are. So that's it in a nutshell. Again, this is the first pass. It's still relatively early in the process, but I would love to take any questions that you might have.
Joe, you want to go back to the override number there that you were showing? No, you went past it, didn't you?
I don't have any override number here. I
It
have
was
a
$1
number.
million. Well, no, you had the 1,000,007 or something like that, which was a shortfall, didn't you?
Oh, that's the shortfall. Sure.
I guess that's the number I'm talking about.
Right there.
Yeah.
Vicki.
So, just in terms of the positions that were not added, I know, so we're looking at the 2 school psychology positions, school psychologists, and 1 team chair. So when we had the special education services assessment back in August, we were told that we were very lightly staffed in psychology and lightly staffed in behavioral health. And so I noticed some of the positions that were requested at MISCO were there were 4 special education positions and a school adjustment counselor position. So I'm just kind of wondering what other, aside from those positions, what other programming and services that are in our strategic plan are we not able to move forward with at this point due
Sure.
to financial?
To be really, I'm glad you asked that, Vicki. I think to be super clear, those would be number 1 on my priority list because I think there's some there's critical needs, particularly at the elementary level. And poor Jan and Deb, I've kind of gently been saying no way too long. Jan and Deb have been consistent over the last 3 or 4 years in putting consistently the requests in. I would say also the middle school is real critical with the needs of additional special educators, potentially BCBAs to serve some of the needs there. But I think to kind of go back to, let me go back to the slide here of these positions. In the strategic plan, to answer your question specifically, there is a lot of talk around the math and literacy coaches, again, around skillful pedagogy, okay, and what the needs are. I think also, as a Spanish immersion team, we've been talking about equity for a period of 7-8 years now, and the value of having a FLES, or foreign language, at the elementary school program is real critical. But then I also go back to Nipmuc, and again, the point that I made earlier about not having really a technology program. I think our teachers are amazing here, the way they integrate technology, but what about a kid at Nipmuc that wants to learn more about coding, and they want to be a coding engineer? What about somebody who wants to do something with media, like having a media lab and doing production? We don't have anything like that to offer kids. So I think those are some real critical needs. And I would also go back to these 2 positions, the English teacher, and then before that, going back 5 or 6 years, we also, by attrition, eliminated a math position. So yes, we have some creeping numbers with regard to class sizes here at Nipmuc, but there's also some disparities. So you might find a class size of 31 or 32. So some additional staffing is needed there as well.
But just to be clear, that's above and beyond even what you're recommending for the current budget?
I'm trying to, I feel like part of my job is to look at things as level-headedly as possible, and I want to be very, very clear. I know that our 2 towns, the effort is there. I've said to you as a committee, but I've also said very publicly, I know last year was difficult, and I know last year was a stretch for both of our communities. I know that very, very clearly. So again, I could put all these things in a budget and present you first pass budget with an increase of 15, 16%, and somebody could look at me and say, okay, Joe, what color is the sky in your world? So it's really about balance, but I think I don't want this to go away, and I think having that 5-year discussion and talking about critical needs and targeted investments over a 5-year period and what is the commitment, I think that's a critical conversation.
So would you characterize the situation that we're in as that we're falling behind in terms of funding? and
Oh, absolutely.
requirements.
Absolutely.
So as we go further into the future, we'll fall behind more and more and more.
Absolutely.
So we have to have some understanding of what that requirement is for the school over the next 5 years, so that the town's.
Absolutely, and that's my goal for the next school committee meeting. But to be very, very clear too, I think what would be problematic, and I think this is what the district experienced between 09 and 11, is if we were to get into a situation, to go back to this slide, your favorite slide, Paul, where we have to sustain cuts, that starts FY22 and even that much more of a deficit. And then the FY22 ask will be even larger. And you'll experience the 2021 school year at a real deficit, where all those things that I talked about as far as larger class sizes and so on will come to fruition. So it's a real challenge. I mean, keep in mind where we were in 2015, 5 years ago, was at a similar place. And the overwhelming majority, probably upwards of about 85% of that override, there was definitely growth, and we were able to make some great investments as far as investing in our athletics program, investing more into inclusion, and so on. But the overwhelming majority of that override in 2015, as you know, Phil and Lee will remember, was to sustain what we had, to sustain the positive momentum. And I think it can't be underscored enough that this district has enjoyed a lot of positive momentum and a lot of success.
Joe, can I just clarify something? Because I'm concerned that that 1796 number, that's based on both towns giving us a net increase
Correct.
in those MLCs, which both towns so far have indicated they cannot do.
Correct. So that 1.796 could be much worse.
Correct.
Well, the town of Upton has, if you take 2.5%, is $500,008 and change. Kelly, yes?
What was that figure?
The 2.5% to us is $500,008 or something like that.
508,000 plus the new growth.
Yeah, which is we're saying 250.
Yeah.
So the town of Upton can raise $750,000 additional. All right. Now we still have a town to run, and as Mendon has a town to run. Now you can only cut that pie in so many pieces before you have to, start doing things. Yeah, the thing, what's driving it? Yeah, the minimum local contribution, that's only going to get worse, okay? Kelly, I hate to drag you into it. How much did the value of the town of Upton go up in the last year? Some crazy number, like 3.5%, 4%, something like that, isn't it?
The values went up on average 3 to 4%.
Yeah. And they're just going to get, it's probably just going to get worse. And the thing that drives it is all these people that want to come in and, the house is on the market for $400,000, but they're willing to pay $475 for it. That's what kills it.
Because we have a good school district, that's why they do that.
Well, I'm not saying if and a but that's one of the reasons that brings people to the district.
And I think we can have a conversation about minimum local contribution. We can have a conversation about target share, the funding formula, the wisdom of it, the fairness of it, and so on. But I think ultimately this is a conversation about the community and the quality of the public schools in the community.
Because those factors that you just mentioned aren't going to go away. They're not going to get any better.
No, they're not. Unfortunately, they're not.
We're going to be to the 82.5%. I know Joe said maybe 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised if we were there in 3. The state is basically saying, we're not going to give you any more money. We're going to expect you to fund it because the affluence level in your towns are at the point where you can, quote unquote, afford it according to them.
Oh,
and you're right.
I'm not arguing it.
You got to balance the running of the town. You got to balance the running of all of those things. And the reality, to the point that you always express to me, we are 2-bedroom communities. We don't have huge business bases. We don't have huge commercial bases. So it really comes down to the community saying, what is it that they want?
I remember during the override campaign of 2015, I tend to be a math science guy. It's my training. I tend to be a little bit of a stat and data geek. And I remember touching base with Kelly and also the town clerk in Mendon to find out what percentage of the tax base was residential. And I remember the statistic was for Mendon, it was roughly 94%. And I think you just told me in Mendon it's 95.9%, you told me?
In Upton, yes.
Yeah, in Upton, rather, I'm sorry. Probably the other 6% is Imperial?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I think, again, it is the reality of, like Phil says, of being in 2-bedroom communities.
Quick question, just that you're touching on that now. Do they even take a commercial base into account, or is it always, it's just based on the income of the town, right? So that the commercial base wouldn't even come into play in the form?
Well, no, it would come into play as far as property values. But no, it wouldn't come into play for personal income. Any other questions?
So when can you share more detail about what, the potential reality, like?
So what I'll do is we have a very, because the way the calendar falls is we have very much an expedited timeline. So we only have one regular school committee meeting before March 9th. It's 2 weeks from today, the 24th. So the 24th, what I'll do is I will share some of those 5-year projections and also, per your requests, some of a little bit more details. But then we have our budget certification hearing on March 9th, which is here in the auditorium. But keep in mind, the thing that's always very interesting is sometimes as we go through the budget process, with regard to first the governor's budget in January, and then in April the House budget, and then in May the Senate budget, sometimes there's a usual shifting of Chapter 78. We've been told categorically with the Student Opportunity Act that $30 is going to be static. That is not going to change one bit, okay? We might pick up a little bit additional in regional transportation. I would anticipate it would be modest, maybe an additional 20 or 30,000. And really the only variance that we have at this point in our budget is the health insurance. As Jay and I always do, we track it on a monthly basis as far as our utilization rate, and we're hoping to negotiate within the next month or two the best possible rate that we can get. Sure.
So if we're not meeting our special education students and they have to go on to programs, we have to pay for that, correct?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then if kids aren't getting what they need here and they go to charter schools, we're responsible for that. Are we, or are we not?
Well, we're responsible for a portion of what kids for charter schools, we're responsible for a portion or all of their tuition. Okay, and kind of the interesting thing is, say we were just the Upton School District, we weren't a regional school district, then the invoices would go directly to the municipality. But being a regional school district, for things like charter schools, or in some cases voc tech schools, the invoices come directly to us and we subsume them in our budget. The interesting piece about charter schools is there's only partial reimbursement for the first 3 years. So the majority of our kids that go to the charter school, they access, I think of the 12 kids, something like 8 of them are at the Ben Franklin Charter School in Franklin. That's a K through 8 school. The state only gives you funding for those kiddos the first 3 years. So if you've got a kid that's going there K through 8, you're only getting K1 and 2. So 3 through 8, we're on the hook for their tuition.
So basically, if we're not meeting the shortfall and we're getting the budget, those cuts for the staffing. So now the town is not only paying for what we have limited, but now we're paying other schools to provide the education for our kids.
You could look at it that way.
That's what's happening when you look at Northbridge and some of the others in terms of what they've done over the past years. When Joe talked about the influx of students that are coming here, there are some controls in place, but they only have some control to a degree.
Right, but it may benefit the parents to understand in the towns that we want to keep the resources here, so we're not paying the other schools.
Well, a great
to educate
example
our children.
is when we had the last issue. If you looked at the matriculation into the high school, it all of a sudden shifted quite dramatically to BBT across the street because we actually have the option in both towns between two very good schools. But the reality is, in the world of BBT, the townspeople really have no control because the number is what the number is and what they've set it at. So, because you'd have to get a significant number of towns to basically control it in another way.
I think that would happen as a second step, as they started to see problems if this budget wasn't passed. So, you didn't mention the whole complexity around that, but yeah, it is a consequence of not having this budget passed. Right?
I mean, until you came to our PTO meeting last year, I was aware of the special education piece of it because I have a little bit of knowledge in that aspect, but in terms of the chart, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many people in this town realize that we are paying for our students to go elsewhere as well.
So another one that is even more dramatic is we have at the present time, we have 13 students that access Norfolk Aggie. Okay? We get an invoice for each of those students for $23,600. So do some quick math there. That's over $250,000 for 13 students. Now, God bless them. I want them to have a high quality education, but that invoice is that's taken on by the regional school district budget. So again, that speaks to, okay, why are those students going there? And in some cases, it's students that didn't get into BVT and they really want a vocational education. You might have some students in Mendon that actually still live on a working farm, and that's going to be their career and so on. But that's an additional stressor. But to go to the whole choice argument that Phil was touching upon, because of the success of the district, I can tell you in the 2011 school year, my first year here, we had maybe about 90 students choicing in still, but we had about 80 choicing out. And now it's 169 choicing in, and we only lose about 40. So those little things make a difference about, again, keeping our resources. Yes?
As a parent who moved here because the schools are so good,
Yeah.
And I'm still at the elementary level, and I'm a mental health professional, so I definitely see this need, but I also worry on the long-term impact. If the high school is not considered accredited, what does that do, not only for our town, but for our students? I don't know what the impact is if we don't get accredited.
Well, I think it's obviously it would have a deleterious impact. That I think all of this becomes very cyclical, and it has negative consequences, and it takes a long time to dig out of it. You can't say, okay, it changes only in 1 or 2 years. I would say from those cuts in 09 to 11, we really didn't see the forward momentum until 14, 15, 16, and so on. So to answer your short question, if the high school were to receive probationary status for lack of support, that becomes something that's public. So if obviously, that would receive press attention, but if you go to NEAS website, they will list who the probation schools are. I think it's one of these things where, to be very honest, if students are applying to colleges from a probation high school, it doesn't mean, okay, you've got this horrible blacklist. But I think what happens is internally at the college and university level, high schools have reputations. And if a community has its high school, its only high school, on probation, then that obviously has an effect in the admissions process. Yes,
So
Lee?
will this presentation and future supporting data that you may have be placed on the district website?
Yes,
or
so
how are you communicating this?
you don't need to take pictures. I'm mailing this out to the staff first thing. But yes, it will be placed on the mursd.org website, along with the supporting documentation document.
And or is the budget.org, there's another.
Yes, that needs a little work still, but that will also be there. We'll roll out the specifics of that on February 24th.
Put you on the spot for a
Yeah.
second. I'm hoping you're gonna come to PTO meetings to share all this again.
Book me in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
You're talking about revenue, and let's just say outgoing charges for, say, Norfolk Aggie. For those incoming students, I think you said it's 169 students that are school choicing in. What does the revenue side of that look like? Have we got any sort of an increase? I know a few years ago.
Unfortunately, absolutely not a penny. I want to say for at least the last 10 years, it's been a flat 5,500. Why do we not stop it? No. So here's the deal with school choice. School choice is a good thing because it helps with our revenue. Okay, and we use our choice funds to offset the assessments to our two towns. But the key thing about school choice is you have to use it judiciously, in the sense of, say you have a class size of 19, and you know I can run with 23 or 24. So I can accept that 4 or 5 kids at choice at $5,500. But keep in mind, it costs about $13,500 on average to educate a child in the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. So you don't want a situation, say, I have my kindergarten classes at Memorial and Clough, where I'm going to say, okay, for the incoming kindergartners, I'm going to accept 18 choice students, and I'm going to have one section of choice. That doesn't make any sense because you actually start to lose money. So we're really at kind of a tipping point as far as the number. We've kind of maxed out being at 169, the number of choice kids that we can take, where it's still smart and it makes sense because we're plugging them in not to max out class sizes, but also to enhance our revenue. But to my first point, it is not good that for 10 years they haven't increased that amount.
Now, is that the state that sets that number?
Yeah.
Or is that some sort of-
It's the state. We have no choice. We basically it's a numbers game as far as we invoice the communities of the 40 kids that go out. I'm sorry, we invoice the 169 from the communities that the kids are coming in, and we receive invoices for the 40 Mendon and Upton kids that are choicing out. Anything else?
Seeing nothing. Any other questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Probably do it another time, but I'm just wondering, besides always trying to hit all of the teachers and all that stuff, I haven't yet seen what other areas has the district looking at.
So at this junction, if you know what I talked about is, I didn't say specifically teachers, I said 25 to 30 professional and support staff. So the vision would be, it isn't going to be like, hey, you know what, everybody, it's going to be nothing but teachers. I would say in an unfortunate circumstance, it would be across the board.
All right, I just want to say that all these questions are fantastic. Thank you so much. We've done a series of meetings for the budget, through the budget subcommittee meetings that the town has had, or that we have had, I'm sorry, just to remain transparent about all the expenditures that we've had, where we could make cuts, what the impact of those cuts were. We've had plenty of these meetings, and we hope that everybody can attend here for the next month and a half while the towns are making these decisions. So we need that input, we need that feedback. and we want to be as transparent as we possibly can. All right, with that, I think we can move on. So, next on the agenda is new business, approval of the 2021 Mercy calendar.
So you have it in your packet. It's pretty straightforward as far as kind of the stamp your template. You probably will notice because of the falling of the school year, and specifically Labor Day. Labor Day, correct me if I'm wrong, is always the first Monday of September, and it's the last possible date. So it's September 7th this year. So we have a little bit of a later start with regard to the kids coming in on the 2nd of September. And one other change with regard to our PD Day, which is typically the Friday before Columbus Day. Because we have a national election in 2020, we will not have children in the building.
I wonder why you were
Kelly.
looking at me as you were talking about this.
However, our teachers and professional staff will be hard at work on a professional day on that day, but it's pretty straightforward.
And as someone that runs elections, I greatly appreciate that.
Be aimed, please.
So we do have to approve this, is that correct?
You did.
Okay, so...
Hold on, can I just make a point?
Sure.
So I'm going to come back to it because
I know
I have a
what's
presentation
coming.
this year on it. Can we
I-
please remove Good Friday? And I said, if people need to take it off, being Catholic myself, the removal of Good Friday. Good Friday is a religious holiday, which is fine for a religious exception. It's an excused absence like any other religion. Could we please remove it?
Okay, so point of order, if we had gotten the motion and then gotten the second, then we could discuss that.
Well, I made a motion to remove Good Friday on the academic calendar.
Do I hear a second? There's no second.
Okay.
A second?
I said
Second,
my piece.
second from Nikki. Okay, so now we can discuss, Bill. So would you like to remove?
I would like to remove Good Friday. We had a very compelling presentation that was delivered by one of the Misco Hill students to ask if we recognized this religious holiday, why weren't we recognizing all of these other religious holidays? Which I felt was very compelling, but at the same point, I realized the challenge of that. But inside of our policy book, we currently state, and we're clear about it, that religious holidays are an excused absence. So my point being is that I would just ask that we could remove this. That way the school year could end a day earlier if we had additional snow days. But more importantly, too, we're not being specific to one religion over another. And if people need to take it off, it is an excused absence.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on that? Would you like to make a motion for that, to change, to amend the school calendar?
Can I speak to it, please?
Yes.
I understand Phil's sentiment. I don't know if it's necessarily advisable for the simple reason that it is something that is entrenched within the district, within the two communities. I know the historical basis is probably because we've been a majority Christian, probably majority Catholic, two communities. Perhaps maybe a mid-range point, and again, this would not do anything. This could help us with Phil's place, would be perhaps going to a half day like BBT does. Still would count as an instructional day. My big concern, and I've seen this in a few communities in Rhode Island, near where I live, is when this change was made, specifically, you could Google this in the city of Cranston, not to be cynical, but suddenly a lot of people found religion on that day. And there was a real concern with regard to staff absenteeism. And my concern would be if we were to go for an immediate change from full day, no school to full day. Would we potentially see something like that? I have that concern about potentially a lot of people calling out and so on. I think perhaps a midpoint view would be the half day, for the simple reason that for folks that do observe religious observations, usually the services do not begin at the earliest by 12. Mm-hmm. And I think even at the church in Upton, the Stations of the Cross, correct me if I'm wrong, the services are usually around 3 in the afternoon. So just my feeling, obviously it's a decision for the school committee, but trust me, this is an issue that I've given some thought to.
So I am amenable to that. I think that's a valid compromise.
All right, so why don't we entertain a motion to have the half-day proposed?
I make a motion to amend the calendar to represent.
To amend the motion.
Yeah, to amend the motion.
To amend the motion.
That's right.
I make a motion to amend the motion to amend the calendar to removal of the Good Friday holiday to instead be changed to a half day of the Good Friday holiday.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. So we will vote on the motion to amend. All right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I don't hear any opposed. So we would like to now vote on the motion to approve the calendar with the amendment that has been approved. All those in favor say aye. Huh? Yeah, we did. We made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that sounds pretty good. We got that one through, Joe.
Very good.
So we have a new calendar with the half-day on Good Friday.
Yeah, for posterity's sake, what I'll do is at our next meeting on the 24th, I'll present just so you can see it with the changes.
Excellent.
Okay?
All right, next item, old business. Do we have any old business? Any old business? None. Next, correspondence. Do we have any correspondence?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. What I have put in your packet, and again, this is something that I probably will be bringing to you in the month of March, is correspondence from the Department of Education. This would be the definition of irony, where we are expected to complete as a district a student opportunity plan for the additional funding that we're receiving through the Student Opportunity Act. Yep, I can't make this up. So they've come to realize what was codified into law was with this additional money, which I showed you, the $304 million, that all 318 districts across the Commonwealth would be submitting a plan. The good news is for districts like ours that are receiving that bare minimum of $30 per kid, it's a short form. But still, if you look at the guidance, it's not that short. Districts like Milford or Worcester have substantially more. However, look this over. I'm going to try to very carefully make this plan aligned with this year's district action plans that you approved back in September. But it has to be approved by the school committee. So probably on our meeting of March 23rd, I will bring this forward to you because it has to be submitted by April 1st. Okay?
Very good. Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of posted meeting? Anyone? No? Okay, so future agenda items will be the technology investments discussion on February 24th. The annual open budget hearing is on March 9th in the school auditorium. And with that, I will Make a motion to roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the successor agreement to the teachers' collective bargaining agreement, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Do you have any roll call vote? Starting at your side?
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can
Second.
take a second. Okay.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Bill Desotter, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Vicki Lundberg, aye.
Okay, we will go to closed session. Thank you very much, everybody.